What is up, all you individuals out there? It's me, full-time anime man, and I would just like to apologize for this video being a bit late. Work has been kicking my butt lately, but I managed to pull through and make this video. Also, in case you all haven't noticed, I recently was able to get my videos monetized for ad revenue, and it would really help me out a lot if this video got a lot of likes. So, just wanted to let you guys know that. Now, with that out of the way, this is What If Deku Was an Ice Wolf? Hope you all enjoy. Where we last left off, both the Todoroki twin brothers saw each other after 9 years of separation. But it wasn't how Shoto was expecting, seeing Izuku, his brother, with a group of bad guys. Will Shoto fall, making Izuku a prisoner of his own body? Or will Shoto manage to rescue his brother from his torment? Let's find out right now. Izuku and Shoto look to each other. Izuku looks up from the bottom of the stairs, while Shoto looks down from the top of the stairs. As the teacher and the rest of the students stare in confusion as the rest of the bad guys emerge from the portal. Everyone from Class 1A except for Shoto turned around trying to escape, but then Izuku conjured thick layers of ice covering the exit of the USJ. Shigaraki smiles and says, "I gotta say, that was quite some quick thinking you did there. Now let's see, where can we get you alone with you and your brother?" Shigaraki looks around and sees what appears to be a giant red circus tent labeled Conflagration Zone. Looking back to Izuku, he says, "Go there and wait for your brother. He will be with you shortly." Izuku nods his head and runs to the fire zone. While this was going on, Shoto couldn't take his eyes off of Izuku and was about to follow him. That was until Aizawa placed a hand on his shoulder. Shoto looks back as Aizawa speaks. "What are you doing? There's too many of them for you to take." Aizawa thinks for a second as the army of bad guys start approaching. He then speaks. "Okay, I'm gonna buy you all some time. Right now, 13, protect the kids, while you all call for help." Aizawa leaps into action, using his scarf to grab the people that made it onto the stairs and then throws them back. One person tries to use his quirk, but finds that he couldn't, for Aizawa was deactivating his abilities. Everyone from the top of the stairs was amazed by their teacher's physical skills. One student tries to call for help, but found that they couldn't. Yaoyorozu, the genius of the group, speaks. "One of them must be jamming our signals." Kirishima tries to punch down the wall of ice, but finds that he couldn't, for it was too tough for him to break. Bakugo continues to watch upon top of the stairs so that no one can get the drop on them. Shoto looks in the direction where his brother went, wanting to go follow him, but they had an unexpected visitor. A big, circulated purple smoke appeared right in front of them. Everyone stares in confusion. Bakugo speaks. "What the hell is that thing?" Korigiri then speaks. "Sorry to intrude. Allow me to introduce ourselves. We are the League of Villains, and we're here to take down the symbol of peace." Before he could say another word, Bakugo and Kirishima charge for an attack, but instead they disappeared into the smoke mist from the rest of Class 1A. Korigiri gets an idea. He speaks. Maybe I'll spread you all around the building so you can meet our acquaintances. Oh, and Shoto Todoroki, we have someone who would like to meet you." Korigiri forms a bubble around everyone. Some managed to escape from him, while some weren't so lucky. Mostly everyone was spread around the USJ, but Shoto was sent to the fire zone. Falling from a high distance, Shoto quickly took action, making a slide in the form of ice under him, breaking his fall. He looks around and sees the buildings were on fire, and it was very dark. He only had the light of the fire to show little bits and pieces of his surroundings. Shoto walked through the facility. He feels like something's wrong. He gets the feeling that someone is watching him. Something very dangerous. Something with the lust for blood. Shoto stayed on guard, traveling through the burning facility. Shoto constantly looked in every direction he heard a sound from. Standing in the middle of the street, he stops, looking around more with only the fire to show his surroundings. Hearing the pitter-patter of footsteps coming from behind one of the buildings, and then, out of nowhere, Shoto's senses went off as he looks up to see Izuku trying to slam down on top of him with large amounts of ice on his fists. Shoto quickly jumped back, barely dodging the attack, as Izuku's ice gauntlets hit the ground, shattering like a mirror. Shoto sees this and catches his breath as his heart was racing. He looks up to see Izuku while wearing his black hoodie, slowly rising up. Their gaze meets each other. Shoto was shocked from what he was seeing, while Izuku's face was bland and showed no emotions. The only remnants of a person that was left inside Izuku was the reflection of the fire in his eyes. Shoto speaks. Izuku, what's going on? Why are you with them? Izuku continues to stand there, not saying anything, with a blank face. Inside his head, Izuku watches the entire thing. He wants to stop this, but he has no power to. Izuku tries to call Shoto's name, hoping that he could hear him, but unfortunately, he was unable to hear him. Shoto continues to stand there, waiting for something to happen, and then he speaks. God damn it, Izuku, say something! Izuku remains silent. He then extends his right arm out to his side as his hand emanated smoke, and then he conjures a katana made of ice. Holding it with both hands, he aims the blade at Shoto, and then, within a flash, Izuku slashed Shoto's left arm. Blood began to spill from the wound. Shoto holds the wound with his right hand as he thinks to himself, wait, when did he cut me? When did he move? I didn't see him. I blinked and he cut me. Shoto slowly turned around to see Izuku with his back turned on him. Izuku lowered his blade, and in doing so, Shoto's blood began to droop off the tip of the blade. Shoto slowly backs up as Izuku turns to face him, raising his blade once again, ready to strike. Shoto knew that Izuku was dangerous, but he didn't want to fight his brother, so he decided to run away from him. After getting a few feet away, Izuku slowly starts following him. Outside of the burning facility, Aizawa was fighting most of the bad guys. He is getting tired, while 13 is fighting Korigiri, using her quirk, Black Hole. But then, Korigiri uses his quirk, making a portal next to her, redirecting her suction onto her, damaging her badly. Most of the students of Class 1A was forced to watch as the person who was protecting them was defeated within an instant second. Korigiri turned to them and said, "Now, children, if you do not wish to be hurt, you will follow my instructions without problems. Do I make myself clear?" Rikido, Zoro, Hanata, Uraraka, Ida, Mina, Inasa, and Koda knew this man was dangerous because they know whatever they throw at him, he will just throw right back. Also, they noticed that this man was made of some sort of smoke substance. so they know that they couldn't physically fight back. And so they knew that if they were going to survive, they would have to do what the villains say. And so they nodded their heads in agreement and raised their hands. Good, said Korigiri. Now, walk down the stairs. They all complied and followed his orders. In other parts of the USJ, in the boating area, Sue and Ojiro were doing their best to fight off the water villains, but they eventually were captured. In the collapse zone, Bakugo and Kirishima were apprehended and rendered unconscious. In the mountain zone, Yaoyorozu, Jiro, and Kaminari were outnumbered, so they surrendered and followed the villains to the center of the USJ. Aizawa was growing tired. His eyeballs turned red from the overusage of his quirk. He took down a multitude of villains, but then Shigaraki stepped in. After closely observing Aizawa, he seized his opportunity to strike, touching Aizawa's shoulder as he screams in agony. Aizawa gets some distance between him and Shigaraki, but then Shigaraki pointed behind Aizawa. Aizawa had slowly turned around to see the Makapichu standing right behind him. We fade to black. Back to Izuku and Shoto. Shoto is currently hiding in a building with less amounts of fire. While everyone was outside being captured, Shoto encountered Izuku unexpectedly, and in those times, Izuku cutted Shoto. Shoto had cut marks nearly all over his body, his arms, his legs, and a gash just on the left side of his cheek. Shoto raises his hand up to his face and said, "Damn, I nearly didn't get a chance to dodge that time. If I hadn't, my head would have been cut off." Shoto looked out a broken window on the 5th floor and sees Izuku looking for him. Shoto whispers, "Brother, what's happened to you? Why are you like this?" Out of the blue, Shoto heard faint howling. He looks out the window to see Izuku has changed into his wolf form and calls for allies. But Shoto was shocked from what he was seeing, for there were blue wolves indicating that they were ice wolves, but there were also red wolves, which means fire. Shoto was shocked from what he was seeing. Fire? But how? I thought he had an ice quirk. Shoto looks to Izuku. The way he looked at the wolves, as if he was telling them to find Shoto. But something was different about one of the wolves that caught Shoto's eye. There were hundreds of wolves, most of them with red eyes, while one of them had green eyes. They all spread it out. Some were checking alleys, while some were looking inside the burning buildings. It won't be long until they find him. Shoto sits back down, looking to all his cut marks that Izuku inflicted on him, doing his best to treat the worst part of the wound. Izuku managed to cut him deeply on the back of his left heel. Shoto then says, "Oh, you really got me there." The pain was too intense for Shoto that he couldn't run, let alone stand. A minute goes by. Shoto is pondering away on whether he should fight his brother or not. "I can't," whispered Shoto. "I don't know what he's been through, but the scar on his face says it. I don't want to hurt him any more than he already is." Right after he said that, he heard the pitter-patter of dog-like claws tapping a hard surface on the floor coming upstairs. Shoto moved to the corner of the room. wanting to run, but his leg was in too much pain for him to do that. All he could do was watch and wait. Sitting on the corner side of the stairs, a passive blue wolf with green eyes emerge the corner. It looks over to see Shoto. Shoto closes his eyes, ready to accept his fate, but instead, the wolf didn't howl to inform the others that he found him. Instead, it walked up to Shoto and nuzzled his face gently. Shoto was confused. Why wasn't this wolf attacking him? But then, the wolf spoke. Shoto, oh my god, I've missed you. Oh my goodness, he really messed you up. Are you okay? Are you any more hurt? Shoto was even more confused. But this wolf was nicer. But why? The wolf then spoke. Shoto, I know you're scared, but it's me, Izuku, the real one. Shoto's eyes widen with bewilderment, and then he speaks. Izuku, is that really you? Izuku nodded his head. Shoto speaks. Oh my god. Izuku, brother, what's happened to you? What the hell is going on? Why is that you attacking me? Clone Wolf Izuku speaks. Right now, I am a prisoner of my own body. I was able to send my consciousness into one of my pack, and I was lucky enough to find you before they did. But I have to tell you this. I am currently under mind control of a parasite in my brain. Its main goal is to kill you so that it could have complete control of my body. Right now, it's attached to my cerebellum, the part of the brain that functions coordination. Izuku pauses for a second, looking to Shoto, and said, Shoto, I know it's going to be difficult for you to do what I'm about to ask you, but you need to kill me before I kill you. Shoto's eyes widen from what Izuku just said. He shakes his head and says, No, I can't do that. There's got to be another way to help you, brother. I can't just... Izuku interrupted him. Shoto, it's the only way. If you don't do it, it will kill you. And I just can't let that happen. Shoto, you have done plenty of things for me. And to that I'm eternally grateful to you. It's about time that I return the favor. Shoto looks to the ground with tears falling down his face. Shoto then hugs Clone Wolfie Izuku. Izuku, I'm sorry, said Shoto. It's okay, said Izuku. It's okay. Oh, and there's something else I need to tell you. It's about our third quirk. Shoto looks to Izuku. After a few minutes, Shoto purposely made a loud noise to catch the attention of the parasite. It runs in the direction of the sound, looking up to see Shoto on top of a mountain of ice. Shoto and the parasite lock eyes. Shoto then slides down the ice while the parasite is in pursuit of Shoto and the rest of the pack, chasing after him. But to their surprise, Shoto was actually faster than before. While they were still chasing him, Shoto ran into the tallest building in the fire zone. Shoto makes his way inside, extinguishing any flames that he comes across. The wolves are still in pursuit of Shoto, following him into the burning building. Shoto runs up the stairs, and so do the wolves. Shoto takes this opportunity to fight back because the wolves are running straight at him and have no other way of dodging his attack. And so Shoto throws massive amounts of ice daggers in their direction. While he was doing this, he had a flashback to what Izuku said on how to defeat him and the pack. You'll have to find a small space, like a flight of stairs. That way you'll have the advantage to strike. And if I'm in a small space, I can't summon allies. The flashback ends. Shoto is shooting ice at the wolves, trying to follow him, and with each hit, they all disappear. Shoto then continued, running up the stairs. The wolves are still in pursuit of him. A couple of floors later, Shoto then began to blast at the wolves once more. He was growing tired, but he kept going. Making his way to the rooftop, Shoto shuts the door. During that attack, Shoto never saw the real Izuku chasing him up the stairs, so that means he must know what he's up to. While alone, Shoto looked to the edge of the building, waiting for something to happen, when all of a sudden, snow began to fall everywhere. Shoto looked around. He speaks, "Wait, what's going on? I'm not doing this." All of a sudden, a gush of wind began to circulate the building, making a snow tornado. Shoto looks around in confusion, and then, out of nowhere, Izuku can be seen floating in the center of the tornado, with the chains spinning over his head with his right arm. Shoto stares in bewilderment as the parasite in Izuku's brain speaks.
"Lights out."
With one fell swoop, Izuku swings the chains in a big circle, blowing out all the fire that was in the fire zone. It was dark, and it was quiet for a couple of seconds. Shoto only heard the sound of his heart beating as he waited and waited. And then Shoto was met with a punch to the face. He falls to the ground, holding his face that he was punched at. He quickly gets up and was immediately met with another punch to the face, but this punch was stronger than the last one, and it almost knocked him off the roof of the building he was on, but he was able to catch himself. There was only enough square space for Izuku and Shoto. This was to assure that Izuku couldn't call any more allies. Shoto quickly recovered to his feet. Shoto closes his eyes and remembers what Clone Wolfie Izuku said to him in the building. "Shoto, you and I are connected. Our third quirk is called Tethered. It's when two twin siblings share a bond of touch and quirks. That's what that light was that night when we were separated. We officially made our bond one, which means I can do what you can do, and you can do what I can do." The flashback ends, and Shoto opens his eyes again, and this time he was ready. Shoto then closes his eyes, taking a deep breath, and raises his hands, prepared. He waits. 10 seconds goes by. He uses his enhanced hearing to listen for Izuku's movements. And then he strikes. Punching to his right, he lands a punch on Izuku's gut. Izuku quickly gets up and runs. And then he tries again, but Shoto was successful in landing another hit again, but this time it was on Izuku's face. This goes on for a minute until Shoto manages to snare Izuku in ice, bonding his hands to his feet while he was on his knees. Shoto was victorious, but he still had the parasite to deal with. The fire zone then reignited, revealing their surroundings. While on the ground, Izuku looks up to Shoto. Shoto walks up to Izuku as he conjures an ice dagger. Holding it with both hands, he then raised the blade over his head, ready to strike Izuku and put him out of his misery. But Shoto is extremely hesitant. He doesn't want to do this, but He feels like he doesn't have a choice. That's when he sees a tear falling down Izuku's face. Shoto gets another flashback to when he spoke to Clone Wolf Izuku. But wait, if you die, doesn't that mean I die with you? Said Shoto. Clone Wolf Izuku responds back, saying, no. Once one of us dies, the tethering will be undone. If you kill me, then I will be the only one that falls. And I'm okay with that, if it means you get a chance to live. Shoto began to cry while sobbing as he speaks. I don't want to do this, brother. Please, there's gotta be another way. Izuku lies down on Shoto's lap and says, Shoto, it's okay. I accept this fate. You know, Shoto, you were always my hero, even in my times in the woods. I always felt like you were there beside me. Izuku then gets up in a sitting position next to Shoto and says, I love you, brother. Shoto then hugs him, and after a few seconds he says, I love you too. And when he said that, Izuku started to shake, and his eyes went back and forth from red to green. What's going on? Said Shoto. Izuku then responded back with a shaky tone. The parasite, it's taking over this clone. Run, Shoto! Shoto then said, no, I won't leave you. Izuku then walked over to an open window and looked down. Before he goes, he then says, I won't let him hurt you anymore. Izuku then jumped, sacrificing his only way of communication to Shoto. Shoto was alone once again. An emotional river hit Shoto hard like a semi-truck. At one moment, Shoto had sheer determination to save his brother the best way that he can. The flashback ends. Shoto has the dagger raised over his head, ready to bring it down. His hands are shaking. He feels off balance, and the ice dagger began to melt in his hands. Shoto then looked down to Izuku. He closes his eyes, and then he swings the blade downwards towards Izuku. We fade to black. We then reappear with Shigaraki and the rest of the League of Villains, keeping an eye on Class 1A. The Makapichu had rendered Mr. Aizawa unconscious. Shigaraki paces back and forth, growing anxious, wondering what's going on with Izuku in the fire zone. Giving out a loud grunt and saying out loud, just what the hell's going on in there? What is taking him so long to kill his brother? Shigaraki looks to three of his associates and says, you, and you, go in there and see what's going on. All three of them walk towards the entrance/exit of the fire zone, and as one person reaches the doorknob, it bursts open with an army of wolves emerging from the door. 100 ice wolves, 100 fire wolves, and 200 half-hot, half-cold wolves. These wolves are how they sound. They are passive see-through wolves, color-padded, with the left side being a bright red with yellow eyes that glow, and the right side being blue with yellow eyes that glow. Everyone is baffled of what they were seeing. 400 elemental wolves in front of them, not sure if they should be fearful of them or not. That's when the Todoroki brothers emerge from the fire zone. They exit. Izuku walks out in his Arctic wolf form, while Shoto walks out in his wolf form. His wolf fur was a half and half like wolves, but combined together. Only difference is Although the right side of his fur was that of Arctic wolf, snow white like Izuku, the left side of his fur was the same color pattern, that of a gray wolf. They both marched up to the front, getting in plain sight of everyone, ready for the fight to start. Now, I know you're all wondering, what the hell just happened? And how is Izuku here with Shoto right now if he stabbed him? Well, let's go back some time before this. Shoto did swing the knife downwards, but he purposely missed, driving the weapon into the concrete ground as he falls to his knees. Shoto slowly looks up to Izuku's face. No emotions were still seen, but still, he knew that he could find a way to save his brother. Shoto gets in Izuku's face and says, "I know I can help you, brother. You just have to let me help you." Now, I know if this tether quirk works the way I think it does, then I hope that this works. Shoto then reaches forward, touching both sides of Izuku's head. In doing so, the spots of where his fingers were touching Izuku's head began to glow. Shoto does his best to concentrate, but then Izuku started moving around, trying to stop Shoto. Shoto tightly grips his hands around Izuku's head, trying to remain concentrated, but Izuku kept moving. After a few seconds of trying, the ice that is holding Izuku down started melting. Shoto knew that he had to be quick, and with one last inhale, he shouted out loud, "God damn you, let me in!" Within a flash, both the boys' bodies were emanating light, and Shoto manages to enter Izuku's mind. In reality, Shoto and Izuku were still as statues. In Izuku's mind, Shoto found himself in the dark place where it looks like there was no end. It was just infinite darkness. While looking around, he hears the voice of Izuku. Shoto! Shoto then turned around and sees him with his eyes widen. He takes his first step towards Izuku and says his name, "Izuku!" All of a sudden, Shoto and Izuku were washed away from each other. Shoto found himself rolling around as if he was in a real strong current. After a few seconds, he was washed onto shore. Even though this was in Izuku's state of mind, it felt like he was actually drowning in the water. Shoto opens his eyes and realizes that he's not in the dark place anymore. He found himself in the woods. He quickly stands up, wondering what's going on, until he heard the ominous voice from the sky.
I don't know why you came in here. You think that you could save your brother if you were with him? Wrong. I control this mind, and I can warp it to my will. And don't even bother trying to use your quirk, cause, unfortunately for you, it doesn't work here.
Shoto continues to look up and says, "Well, it must mean something, because at first you tried to prevent me from even touching my brother. You knew that I was coming in to stop you. If I can stop you from the source, then I can free my brother from your clutches. Do you hear me, parasite?" The parasite then spoke.
Foolish Shoto. How about you experience the hell that you put your poor brother through?
All of a sudden, the woods that surrounded Shoto started to grow. He looked down and saw that his hands were now paws, and he had white fur. He was a Zuku when he was 5. and when he was in his wolf cub form. Within an instant, all of Izuku's memories were reenacted, and Shoto was forced to watch. From when Izuku witnessed the carnage of a bear being torn apart, to when he made his first kill, to when he killed the cougar, even that one night, to when Shoto thought the monster had killed his brother, he watched the monster walk past him instead. Shoto says out loud, "Wait, it walked past him? But why? Why did I stop having visions after he didn't die?" I suppose there's more to learn about this tethered quirk. Somewhere else, Izuku was back home, lying down in a bed. He looks around and says, "Wait, was all that a dream?" The parasite responded back, saying,
No.
Izuku responds back, saying, What have you done to my brother?" The parasite then retorts, saying,
Nothing. I just put him in our shoes. The hell he's sentenced to. And now, I want you to see what he's been through, just to see your reaction.
Izuku is confused and says, "But why? You have him right in front of you, so why don't you just do it?" A moment of silence brushes by, and Izuku finally understands and says, "You have no power to hurt him while he's in here, don't you? You can only show us illusions, misdirect us. You can't actually hurt us in here, can't you?" A moment of silence ushers by again. "Why are you quiet all of a sudden?" All of a sudden, the doors to the room open with the older brother, Toya, emerging from it. Izuku's eyes widen as he says, "Toya?" As Toya walks closer, he says, Shoto, you're finally awake." As Izuku continues to stare at his brother, his surroundings then change from the bedroom to the training room, where Toya's body was completely covered in fire. Izuku's face showed signs of extreme distress and discomfort from Toya's horrific predicament. As Toya's screams echo throughout Izuku's head, Izuku covers both of his ears with his hands and says, "I can't stand any more of this." Back to Shoto's perspective. He's witnessing Izuku's time with the League of Villains, when All for One picked him up and corrupted him with the parasite, to when he attacked All Might, when he attacked their father. After he did that, he saw that Izuku was remorseful and regretted everything that he had done, and the time him and Shoto bumped into each other. Izuku saw the night when Shoto saw him with the Makapichu when he was young. Izuku saw it. Shoto walked in front of him, trying to protect him from it, as he was telling him to run. Izuku was surprised, saying, "Shoto." But when it approached him, the vision ended before he could see that the Makapichu walked past him. And then he saw Shoto crying because he thought that the monster had gotten him. Izuku was sad because his brother thought that he'd have been dead this whole time, until he saw another vision of him again years later. Izuku was all caught up with Shoto's memories, and so was Shoto. Shoto was in bewilderment because of the torture the League of Villains put him through. He hated them more than ever. He had nothing but sheer determination to save his brother. Back in the dark place, Shoto was alone and called Izuku's name many times. In the distance, Izuku heard Shoto calling for him. He had ran in the direction while calling his name back. Shoto heard his voice and went in the direction of it. A few minutes pass, and the boys feel like they've been running in an endless void. That's when they both remembered that they are in Izuku's mind, and the parasite was basically warping it to its will, misdirecting them so that they couldn't find each other. After a few minutes have passed, and the two boys see each other, Izuku! Shoto! The two boys run towards each other when all of a sudden a giant brick wall formed in between the two of them. They both look around in bewilderment, wondering what's going on, as a maze formed around them. Shoto, are you okay? Asked Izuku. Shoto then yelled back from the other side of the wall, saying, Yeah, I'm fine. Just hang on. Shoto tries to conjure ice to eject himself over the wall, but he remembered that his powers don't work here. Shoto then says out loud, Damn it, my quirk doesn't work. Izuku, this is your mind. Can't you do something about this wall? Izuku looked down to his hands and said, I don't know. The only thing I ever managed to do was send my conscience to one of my clones, but I gotta try something. Izuku takes a deep breath, placing his right hand on the wall, and in doing so, he then began to glow the color white. And as he does this, he lets out an inhale as he yells, Break! Within the blink of an eye, Izuku bursted a hole through the wall that was separating him and his brother. Shoto then peeked through the hole and sees his brother. Shoto, with excitement in his voice, says, Izuku! Izuku responded back, saying, Shoto! The boys quickly take each other's hand, and Izuku pulls Shoto in on his side. The wall began to reform itself. Both of the boys share a long-needed hug. Shoto then said, I missed you so much. Izuku then said, I missed you too, brother. Their moment was interrupted by the parasite speaking overhead. Don't think this is over. I still have control over this mind. All of a sudden, the world around them started to shake. Slime-like substance fell from the sky, landing near the two boys. As it splatters, both the boys took each other by the hand. Don't let go, Shoto, says Izuku. I will not lose you again, said Shoto. Suddenly, it was like the room was filling up with black water, and soon both of the boys were completely submerged in it. Both of the boys closed their eyes and held their breaths while still holding hands. Both the boys felt like they were being washed away down the stream like before. A few seconds passed. It felt like the flow of water had stopped. But when things have settled, Izuku kept his eyes closed as he speaks. Shoto? Shoto, are you alright? After he said that, he then heard the sound of something snapping together like a rat trap, followed by the sounds of a familiar scream. Izuku quickly opened his eyes. He says, Shoto, what happened to you? Izuku was bewildered from what he was seeing, for Shoto and him were back in the mountains. Snow was falling, and the two boys were small children again. He looked down and saw Shoto was caught in McCoy's spring trap. He looked up and saw that their father, along with other adults, were approaching as Shoto speaks. Izuku, you have to run. No, I'm not leaving you, said Izuku. Shoto then looked back to the flashing lights. Shoto then gives Izuku a hug, and when he let go, he raised his right hand into the air and said, "I won't let him take you back." Izuku watched as Shoto raised his right hand into the air, ready to slam it down, but then everything surrounding him froze in place, except for Izuku, who was able to move around. What's going on?" said the young boy. The voice of the parasite can be heard coming from the sky above.
This is where it all began. The part of your childhood that was stripped from you. But you found a better life after this incident with them.
Izuku looked to his right and saw a light rising over the hill, with Izuku's wolf family emerging from the light. Izuku's eyes widen as he sees all of them: Khan, Sira, Shal. They were all standing there, waiting for him. Izuku continues to look to them as Khan speaks. "Come on, Shinmaku. It's time to come home." Sira then spoke. "You've been through enough. Come on, I'll make you feel better." Shal then speaks. "Yeah, come on. We got the rest of the pack we need to take care of." After a few seconds, the parasite then speaks.
You're here. Shoto is what's keeping you back from being happy. If you want to be with your family, your true family again, all you have to do is let go of Shoto's hand.
The world around Izuku started to warp, revealing Izuku and Shoto still holding hands, with Shoto's eyes closed as if he'd passed out. And then it goes back to the flashback in the mountains. The parasite speaks.
Now, I know I may have been a little unkind at first, but you've been through enough, and I want to give you a settled mind before I let you go. I promise you that I will make your life with the wolves a reality. You'll never have to be feared of losing them again. It will be just you and them forever.
Izuku thinks for a moment, and when the world around him started moving again, and the adults were moving, Shoto was about to slam his hand down. As Izuku watched, he was reluctant. He was reluctant to let it happen. But then he had thought about the only family who he really had left, and how he couldn't let himself live in a fantasy. He wanted his family, his real family. He wanted Shoto. Shoto's hand got closer and closer to the ground, but then Izuku stopped him by blocking Shoto's hand with his left hand, giving him a low five. Shoto looked up in confusion, staring at Izuku, that he couldn't help but notice, seeing that he was crying, with a smile on his face. "What's wrong, Izuku?" said Shoto. Izuku then leaned in and hugged him tightly. When he let go, he then said, "Not this time." Rising up to his feet, he then walked over towards their father. "Izuku, wait, what are you doing?" asked Shoto. Izuku then turned his back towards his brother and said, "Don't worry, it's going to be okay this time." Endeavor approaches Izuku and grabs him by his right arm. and says, "You boys are coming back right now." Out of nowhere, Izuku, while he was still small, hugs his father's arm. Everyone, including Shoto, was taken off by this. What are you doing?" asked Endeavor. Izuku speaks. "Dad, I know you treated me horribly, but I I forgive you." The world around the two boys started changing back and forth from the mountains to the darkness. Endeavor speaks while stuttering. I'll I'll put you back in the backyard. You're you're just a dog to me." Izuku then looked up to his father and says, "It's gonna be okay, Dad. I'll love you no matter what." All of a sudden, the world around them started to change. It was like throwing water at a wet canvas. The impersonation of Endeavor then fell to its knees. It spoke to Izuku. "But I threatened I threatened to kill you. How can you just forgive someone that does that?" Izuku then looked in its eyes and said, "It's okay. If you wanted to, you could have did it a long time ago. You didn't mean it. Family is forever, and no matter what you say, you can't change that." All of a sudden, a light lifted from the horizon like a sun engulfing the world in pure light. Both of the boys were blinded by this light, but after a few seconds, their sight returned to them. Both Izuku and Shoto found themselves in the same spot where Izuku spent his time in the woods. They also looked to each other and saw that they were their proper ages and their proper bodies. The sun was overhead with blue skies, and the sounds of birds chirping can be heard. They both looked around and see a pack of wolves approaching. Shoto thinks that they're dangerous and says, "Stay back, Izuku." Izuku then placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "No, it's okay. These are my family." Izuku kneels down, and so does Shoto. The wolves surrounding the boys, sniffing them, and then one of them spoke. "You did good, Shinmaku. I'm proud of you." Izuku smiles and says, "Thank you, Khan." Shoto was amazed by what he was seeing. These wolves were comforting to him. He then looked over and saw what appeared to be a small humanoid being made of slime sitting on a tree stump. Shoto taps Izuku on his shoulder and points to the figure. Both of the boys then get up and make their way to this thing. Izuku kneels down and says, "So, this is what you look like when you're not splattered all over the place, isn't it?" This figure looked like it was a smaller version of Izuku when he was a boy. Just looking at the ground, its bright yellow eyes that glowed showed signs of distress. It then spoke.
How? How did you know that forgiveness was my weakness?
Izuku then sighed and said, "I didn't. I was just tired of being angry all the time. So, I forgave instead." A sudden pause, and Izuku then says, "You're dying, aren't you?" The small figure then looked up to Izuku and then back down to the ground. Izuku then places a hand on the small figured version of himself and said, "It's okay. I won't let you leave here with a heavy heart." Izuku then embraced the small child version of himself and said, "I forgive you too." The small figure then began to cry as it spoke with a crack in its voice.
Thank you.
Shoto watched because after many years of separation, Izuku has found himself, and so did Shoto. The small child figure then turned to dust as his ashes then blowed in the wind, freeing Izuku from the parasite. Izuku looked up to Shoto and says, "Come on, we need to get back and save your friends." Shoto smiles and nods his head in agreement. We then fade out with a white light, and then we reappear in the fire zone in reality. Both the boys were still in the same position they were in before. Steadily, both the boys then started moving, with Shoto looking down at Izuku, and with Izuku looking up towards Shoto. The ice that was keeping Izuku down melted away. He was freed. Shoto speaks. "Izuku, are you okay now?" Izuku then began to cough uncontrollably. Shoto, concerned, speaks. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Izuku then spoke with a raspy voice, saying, "Yeah, yeah, I'm fine. I just need a moment." Izuku then crawled over to an open spot and regurgitated the black ooze that was once surrounding his brain. When he finished, he then gets up to his feet and faces Shoto. Shoto immediately knew that Izuku was back in control. He saw the life in his eyes. Both of the boys then ran into each other, and they both embraced each other tightly, sharing a hug. After a few seconds, they both give out crying tears of joy. Izuku speaks. "I can't say I missed you enough, brother." Shoto then shakes his head and says, "I swear, on the power that I have, I will not lose you again." After a few seconds of hugging, Izuku speaks. "Oh man, all these cuts. Here, lay down. I got something that can help you." "Okay," said Shoto. Shoto then laid down on his back, and Izuku turned into his Arctic wolf form. "I call this the kiss of Sira," said Izuku. Giving out a howl, a breeze flows by, with a passive blue wolf with fluffy fur approaches Shoto. He was a bit scared, but Izuku comforted him, saying, "Don't worry, she just wants to help you." After hearing those words, Shoto then relaxed. The Sira look-alike then approached Shoto and started licking his cut wounds. With each lick of the cuts, they disappeared, as if nothing had happened. Shoto was amazed at what he was seeing, and when Sira licked the back of his heel, that's when Shoto was healed completely. The Sira look-alike then licked the cut mark on Shoto's face, then nuzzled him as a way of showing signs of kindness. Shoto smiled as the wolf figure then disappeared. Izuku then changed back into his human form and helped his brother up. Shoto takes his hand, and he returns to his feet. "Thank you, Izuku," said Shoto. "It's my pleasure. Now come on. We need to go save your friends while we still have some time." Shoto nodded his head in agreement, and both the boys then ushered down the stairs. While running, Shoto was thinking, and then he spoke. Wait, there's practically an army out there. Hundreds of them. How are we going to stop them on our own? Izuku looks back up to Shoto while smiling and says, well, we'll have to make our own army. What? Says Shoto. While still running down the stairs, Izuku explains to Shoto, do you remember when I told you about our tethered quirk? Yeah, said Shoto. You said that I can do what you can do and you can do what I can do. Exactly, said Izuku. So, if I can call upon allies, so can you. Shoto was amazed about what he was hearing and asks, does that mean I can turn into a wolf too? Izuku turned his head to his brother and says, yep. Wow. When the boys made it to the outside streets of the facility, Shoto speaks. So, what do I do to change? Izuku looked to Shoto and says, you need to feel your inner wolf come to surface. Let me show you. Izuku then kneeled down to his knees. Taking a deep breath, he changes before Shoto's eyes. Shoto was bewildered from what he was seeing. Izuku then speaks. It's easy for me to do it, but you're going to have to learn it quick, for your friends need your help. Try getting on your knees. Shoto follows Izuku's instructions and closes his eyes. Izuku speaks. Okay, now, just focus. After a few seconds, Shoto takes a deep breath and he concentrates. Now, tell me, what do you feel? I feel like something is scratching at my chest. Okay, that's a start. Now, I want you to imagine a door, and that thing that is scratching your chest is your wolf. It's been laid dormant inside you ever since we first tethered. And now, it's time to set it free. Open the door and let it out. Shoto takes this to heart and imagines a door for his wolf to emerge from. He opens it, and all of a sudden, Shoto feels a rush of sensation flowing through his body. He opens his eyes, revealing the colors of his irises, completely covering the rest of his eyeball. His right eye was a light brown, while his left eye was a bright blue. Izuku saw this and was surprised. Shoto had already done it. Izuku continues to watch as Shoto slowly begins to transform before him. Looking closer, Izuku sees Shoto's face slowly begin to change shape. His nose and his mouth slowly began to stretch out, taking the form of that of a dog. His body and limbs then changed shapes. His hair then engrossed into his head as the rest of his body was covered in fur, one half being white as snow and the other half being that of color pattern of a gray wolf. The last thing that had completed the transformation would be his tail emerging from his backside. When his transformation was complete, he stood up with his clothes on the ground as the light of the fire in the background stretched his shadow far out. Izuku was amazed. Walking up to Shoto, he then says, wow, Shoto, you're a wolf now, but your fur is half Arctic wolf, half gray wolf. How did it feel to change for the first time? Shoto grunted and tweaked his shoulders. And then he speaks. Ugh, it was a bit uncomfortable for a second, but I actually feel great. Izuku and his tail began to wag. I know, right? And you look great too. Now, come on, it's time that we make our army. Shoto has a bit of trouble walking on all fours. It's okay. You'll get used to it almost immediately, said Izuku. For now, we need to find a spacious area. Izuku starts walking while Shoto does his best to follow. Both the boys found a spot. Okay, Shoto, this space seems like it's enough for us. Now, the way that I call my pack is that I literally just howl. That's it. But I need a source, so I'm gonna conjure some ice and use the fire so I can call both elements of wolves to aid me. Watch closely. Izuku conjures some ice. He then gets in a sitting position and lets out a howl. From the ice, Izuku's wolf clones emerge. Shoto was amazed from what he was seeing, but he couldn't help but feel baffled when the fire wolves emerge from the flames. They all gather around next to Izuku. He then speaks. See, it's easy. Now, you try. Okay, said Shoto. Shoto then howled, but it wasn't from within. Izuku speaks. No, Shoto, you really need to feel the howl from within. Like, really feel it. Izuku backs up and waits for Shoto. Shoto then takes a deep breath and lets it out slowly. Again and again, he breathes in and exhales. And in doing so, he then lets out an alpha howl. Izuku felt the power of the howl that Shoto put into. He then looked in the direction of the ice and fire. All that appeared was a half ice wolf, which didn't last even a second out of the ice. Izuku looked to the flames, and nothing happened. Izuku was confused, saying, Shoto, what was that? There was only half a wolf there, and you didn't use your fire wolf. What's the matter? Shoto was a bit embarrassed and said, I'm sorry. It's just, ever since that night when we were separated, Dad came to me when I woke up and he told me that I should think of the possibilities I had with my fire quirk. It was at that moment that I've had enough. I told him straight to his face that I'll never use his fire side. It was because of him you were in the woods. It was because of him Mom lost her mind. It was because of him that this has happened to me. Shoto gestures to his scar, placing his left paw on his eye. But most importantly, it was because of him you were with the League of Villains. But luckily you managed to set yourself free. How can I use a quirk that resembles him? Shoto looks to the ground and says, I don't want to be like him. Izuku was unsure of what to say because he wasn't wrong in some ways. Izuku then walked up to Shoto and said, Shoto, listen. I've been using the fire quirk this whole time, and I didn't even know about it until the League of Villains told me about it. Does that make me like Dad? Shoto then looks up to Izuku and says, no, of course you're not. Okay then. Izuku then temporarily changes back into a man and said, and what about these hands? The bad guys out there have hands. Does that make me like them? No, you're not like them at all. Exactly, Shoto. You know why I'm not like them? Because I decide what I want to do with my body. My destiny. Izuku then places a hand on his wolf brother's paw and says, "My quirk. This is not his fire quirk, Shoto. It's yours. But more importantly, it is ours. This fire that we share." Shoto was surprised by Izuku's words. I I've never thought about it that way. Shoto looks to his left side of his gray wolf form and says, "This really is my, no, our quirk. How could I have been so blind?" Izuku then placed a hand on his brother's head and says, "You just needed some help to see it." Shoto then dropped a tear from his left eye, and then all of a sudden the flames that were in the buildings then began to move around as Shoto's left side began to engulfed in flames. Shoto then spreaded his front legs out to his side and lets out a loud howl. The ice that Izuku made began to smoke as fire waved around in the buildings. Shoto had done it. He had made a wolf clone, and it was half hot and half cold like him. Izuku speaks. "I'm so proud of you, brother. Now, come on. We need to make more." Izuku then changed back into his wolf form, and together the Todoroki twin brothers howled, making clones. After some time, they found the exit to the fire zone. But before they opened it, Izuku walks with Shoto, saying, "Are you ready for this?" Shoto then turns his head to Izuku and said, "Hell yeah." They both stare at the door and ordered the pack to knock it down. And in doing so, they knocked the person who was on the other side of the door unconscious. As the rest of the pack walk outside, revealing themselves to the rest of the League of the Villains. And when they have all made it out, both the Todoroki brothers walked out together, making their way to the front in sight of everyone else. The Todoroki twin brothers stared at Shigaraki, ready for a fight to start. As the tension grows between the Todoroki brothers and the League of Villains, they both gave out a howl, and all of the ice, fire, and half-hot, half-cold wolves charged in an attack, as the screen pauses like someone taking a photo. And that's how the story ends in part 5. Okay, now, sorry that this video took a little bit. Work has been kicking my butt lately. I have about 2 more Ice Wolf what-ifs before I move on to the next one. And looking to the voting poll, let me show you. Most people have voted that I finish Firewolf before I continue on with a new what if. And so that's just what I'm going to do. But before I do get to finishing Ice Wolf, I'm going to go ahead and make the next part to what if Deku was a Storm Wolf, because that video has been blowing up like crazy, and I feel like I really need to get back to that before I lose people's interests. So, with that out of the way, I hope everyone has a nice day, and if you have made it to the end of this video, consider yourselves #blessed, and I hope everyone has a nice day. Goodbye.